Hello, welcome to or back to the podcast. I just recently completed my first year in my late 20s, and since I have finally accepted your girl is in her late 20s, I thought it was time that I shared and reflected upon what my mid-20s taught me. Welcome to another creative podcast, where creative outcasts come together to share their stories so we can all feel a little less lonely. I'm your host, Janelle Marquez. I think as a creative, I grew the most in my mid-20s. It's where I worked the hardest. It's where I also gained a lot and lost a lot. I remember when I turned 23, I really felt like, all right, I got this. I'm going to be so good these, end of my early 20s. Like, I'm so ready to be an adult, yada, yada, yada. And in fact, I feel like I actually grew up a little too quickly in my mid-20s. I got my first real adult job in my mid-20s. I learned a lot about responsibility. I learned a lot about myself and how I work. And I also really embraced being a creative for once in my life. A lot of it was because I was making my income off of being a creative, but I also lived a life that was very different from a lot of people around me when I was entering my mid-20s. And a lot of my mid-20s, if I'm being honest, was me undoing a lot of the damage I had done and just healing from a lot of things I experienced in my early 20s. I grew up very quickly, but it was in the sense that I didn't really have much of a partying phase at all. I had a lot more responsibilities. I had a lot more financial responsibilities than most people. I also was in a very serious relationship, and we did end up getting married in my mid-20s. And in my eyes, I think we got married very young, and I don't recommend that to anyone because I don't think a lot of people value marriage like it once was. And I'm very, very lucky that I'm with somebody who is going through their mid-20s with me. And I'm really lucky that I was going through my mid-20s and growing through my mid-20s with someone who was also at the same place in life with me. And they completely understood everything, which made sense for us to get married. But a lot of people around me in my early mid-20s were not getting married, were not in very serious jobs, were not doing the mental healing that I was. So a lot of my mid-20s were actually very isolating. And I feel like I spent all of my first year, which was last year, of my late 20s, trying to undo a lot of bad habits I had picked up. But with all that being said, when I look back and reflect on my mid-20s, I learned so much, and I'm so happy I learned all these lessons because they've helped shape who I am today. And I thought this could be really helpful to share with anyone who's also going through their mid-20s, or just anyone who's going through the life things. Maybe you could learn a thing or two from what I experienced, and hopefully sooner than I did. So one of the first things my mid-20s taught me was to bet on myself. For the most part, I've always been very confident about who I am. I've always known that I wanted to be around people. I wanted to thrive with people. I've always known that I've also just always wanted to be on some sort of platform, which whether it was a physical platform like a stage or an online platform, like this. I've always wanted to just be in front of people, and I don't necessarily want to say like performing. I've just always wanted to connect with people. It's why I grew up loving theater and dance, and also just being in different communities. So because I've always felt so confident about what I can bring to the table, I really embraced that in my mid-20s when it came to making decisions. I chose to bet on myself all the time. And that's one of the biggest lessons I even learned. And that's one of my favorite lessons I probably learned, is just to bet on yourself. I can confidently say that it's always been worth it. And even when things didn't play out as I hoped they would, it was still worth doing because I learned something from it. This lesson also is one that taught me to just really trust my gut. When I feel confident about something, when I have an idea come to me, to just really lean into it. Like, I'm having these thoughts for a reason, so let's figure out why. And to go hand in hand with that, I also feel like this lesson taught me to advocate for myself. I'm proud that a younger version of me has never had a problem with sticking up for myself. When I was 19 and I was going through a mental health crisis, I was advocating for myself to get help any chance that I could. And that's not where it ended. I would advocate for myself to get a higher pay at a job all throughout my early 20s and in my mid 20s. I was advocating for myself to be in rooms I believed I deserved to be in positions where I can make decisions that I believed I should be in. And now in my late 20s, advocating for myself is not even an issue. It's not even a second thought. And not only that, but advocating for others is now something that I feel like I can confidently do. And I love being able to say that because I know how scary it is to speak up for things, but I also know how important it is to not stay quiet. The second thing another thing my mid-20s taught me was to take care of my physical and mental health. And whether it be at the same time or not, I really learned the importance of this because I spent a lot of my mid-20s neglecting my physical health. And it wasn't until last year that I really learned how important it is to be active physically in any way, shape, or form. 30 minutes a day can truly make a difference to your body physically and also to your brain. Showing up every day to put in the work and be disciplined when you don't even have the motivation to, or you're like not mentally well, like that actually does good for your brain, even when you don't feel like it in the moment. This lesson also taught me how valuable resting and recovery truly is. I became a bit of a workaholic in my mid-20s, and I was always so tired. I was always so stressed out. I was such a mess, and I'll be really honest, a lot of it got worse in my mid-20s, and it started affecting my appetite. I would get so stressed out that I just could not eat. I didn't feel hungry at all. I just could not eat anything because I just didn't have an appetite because I was so stressed all the time. And that took years and years of undoing. But it is also something that I'm glad I learned in my mid-20s, because now that I'm in my late 20s, I really prioritize fueling my body and filling it with good things. Because if you're someone who's like incredibly passionate about doing something, I feel like it's really easy to kind of get stuck in like a flow state, or like a state where you are locked in and you kind of forget to be a human, and your diet can really take a toll on that. And if it's not your diet, your sleep can also take a hit, and you become restless and exhausted, and you can't really function to your best ability. I know I'm not the only creative who has gone through that, but just as a person in general, burnout happens. And as a creative, I think it happens a little bit more often than the normal person experiences. And I feel like in my mid-20s, I didn't know how to rest. I didn't know how to recover. I didn't know how to take care of myself. And it's just something that took a lot of time to learn and a lot of therapy, unfortunately. Another thing my mid-20s taught me is that your environment matters a lot more than you think. That includes like where you're at physically, who you're with, and also where your brain is at mentally. It's really hard when you're young to identify patterns of behaviors that aren't good for you. And in my mid-20s, I really struggled with identifying what types of relationships I had in my life. I had a lot of friendships that were very one-sided in my early to mid-20s. And I also had a majority of my friendships really be the types of friendships that just grew apart. And when I really looked back at them, it's not because of anything too deep, really. A lot of the times it was just growing apart and being at different places in our lives. But there were also a lot of relationships in my mid-20s, whether it be like casual or professional, where I was being taken advantage of a lot, and it was really hard for me to see. And a lot of the times I wouldn't see it till it was too late. And as a creative, I think it's really easy to think that everybody wants to network with you, and that like when you're networking, you're making these like really genuine, honest relationships and connections. But sometimes when you're too close to something, it's hard to notice when something is actually hurting you more than it's serving you. And that was a really tough lesson for me to learn in my mid-20s, because I genuinely thought that I would have all these like really great friends and that these connections were gonna be so long and lasting. But a lot of the times they were just like industry friends and not real friendships. And I found myself getting hurt a lot of the times. But now in my late 20s, I feel a lot better about the types of relationships I have with people. But my mid-20s was definitely a tough one in the friendship category, which led to me being just very isolated for a majority of it. And now that I'm in my late 20s, I'm learning to be okay with the types of relationships that I've created. And I'm okay with letting certain relationships die out. And I'm also okay with welcoming and rekindling new relationships as well. I think that also shows how much my mid-20s allowed me to like process and heal from things as well. And I think this next lesson I learned kind of piggybacks on that, because another thing that my mid-20s taught me was to laugh as much as I cry, and if not, laugh even more than I cried, because I think I cried the most I've ever had in my mid-20s. But also I want to say that for a good chunk of my mid-20s, I became very tough with the world, and I almost shut down and shut off, which was another reason why I spent a lot of my mid-20s very isolated. I just remember at some point, I just became so serious. I just kind of lost all sense of humor. Like my husband would be trying to make a joke and my mom would be trying to laugh with me, and you couldn't get me to laugh. If anything, I'd be angry. And I just didn't know how to let loose. I was just so stiff. And honestly, I was just very afraid to feel things. Like now I can say that I learned to not be afraid to feel emotions, but that was really hard for me to like accept when I was in my mid-20s. I've now learned that it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel stressed, it's okay to feel grief over things I didn't even know I was grieving. It overall just honestly also taught me to just not be so serious. I remember this winter, I couldn't help but tell the people around me, like, gosh, I forgot how funny I was. I forgot how unserious I am. And I think I've healed from a lot of things in my mid-20s. It's almost like my brain was so frightened to laugh or just not be serious, because if I did so, everything was going to fall apart and come crashing down. But I can confidently say that just overall things just aren't as serious as I once thought they were. And in my mid-20s, I truly believed that if I stopped and took a break for 1 second, that the whole world was going to come crashing down on me and I was going to have nothing. Like, to now be in my late 20s and be so okay with not being so serious all the time, there's surely no better feeling. To kind of go hand in hand with that thought, I also learned in my mid-20s to be okay with being bad at things. I remember being put in so many positions in my mid-20s where I knew I wasn't the best at something, but I knew I could maybe get there. And with that thought, I was okay with just trying things, even if I wasn't the best at it. And I spent all my mid-20s trying new things, learning new things, and most of the times I actually got really good at it, but there were some things that I never got really great at. And I am now okay with that. My mid-20s taught me to be okay with being bad at things. I learned so much in my mid-20s that now that I'm in that last year when I entered my late 20s, I wanted to embrace being a beginner at so many things. And even to this date, like, I just turned 28 last month and I am still constantly learning new things, and I'm excited to learn things. I'm excited to fail forward. And in my mid-20s, that was like the most horrifying thought. Failing or just not being the best at something was just something I just could not fathom nor accept, because it just all felt like failure. And that's simply just not true. In fact, I wish I would have tried new things more often when I was in my mid-20s. Now I'm in my late 20s and I'm all game for it. But I do think that I was just so afraid to be bad at things. Like, it just wasn't an option. I felt like if I was going to do something, I had to be really good at it. Anytime somebody provided me feedback, it was incredibly hard for me to take. Whereas now when I receive feedback, it's something that I actually welcome and am accepting of, because that's what comes with trying new things. The next lesson my mid-20s taught me was to stop explaining myself. I felt like everything I did had to have an explanation. I felt like I had to have a reason for every single thing. And especially when I was going through really deep, rough times, I felt like everyone kind of had to know, or like I felt like everyone deserved an explanation. But that's like the furthest thing from the truth. I don't have to explain myself to anyone, especially those who don't really matter. Most people are actually more nosy and curious about things versus coming from a place of care. And that's been like a hard pill for me to swallow, because I just want to be understood. I want everyone to just get where I'm coming from. But like, that actually has done me more harm than good in my early 20s and my mid 20s. And I've just kind of accepted that not everyone needs to know everything and not everything needs to be explained. And some things I'm okay to let live within me or within my circle or wherever it lives. And the last lesson my mid-20s taught me was to just keep going, keep fighting, keep showing up, and to just be resilient. In my mid-20s, I felt like I was so successful, but also such a failure all at the same time. I think I had the lowest sense of self-worth in my mid-20s because I felt like I was constantly fighting adversity and constantly trying to climb these ladders and trying to reach these goals that I didn't even know if I wanted them for myself. I think it was just kind of what was expected for me. And it was really hard to keep going for so long because at some point I kind of was like, what is all this for? Now that I'm older, I can say everything's been worth doing so and I don't regret anything. But there were so many times where I was battling the what ifs of, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I can keep going. Yet I still did. I went through so many challenges and struggles. My mental health was tested in ways I didn't even know I'd be tested in, but I made it. I made it through. I got through so much stuff, and I would not be here today if I didn't choose to get up and get back at it every single time I fell down. And even when I stayed up and was reaching new heights and like finding my footing in a comfortable place, I've learned to not be complacent if it's not what I want. I learned to continue to keep pushing for what it is that I want, what it is I wanted to achieve, to not just accept what is and go after what it is that I want and see for myself. And that's kind of how we ended up here with the podcast, because this month has been so hectic and I have been struggling to continue to do the things that I enjoy because I'm a little bit tired, but I know I have something good here and I want to keep doing this. So I'm taking the lessons I learned from my mid-20s and I'm showing up and I'm betting on myself, and I'm just honestly not taking life so serious because life's too short to do so. And I feel like that kind of wraps up this entire episode, if I'm being honest. I kind of wanted to make this one a little short and a little sweet because I think sometimes episodes like this, especially as a creative, are some that you just kind of need to hear in case you need any of these as reminders in whatever phase of life you're currently in. Because I know your 20s can be so scary, but it could also be the most transformative time of your life. And yeah, that's kind of it. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. Let me know what you have learned in your early 20s, mid-20s, even late 20s, as I'm currently in them. Yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. This is one of many reflective episodes I'd like to have on the podcast. These conversations are fun ones to have every now and then. So I appreciate you guys all for listening, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.